And there we go. So we're live.
Cool.
Valerio, thank you so much for coming out, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
how's it going?
Thank you very much. Yeah, Justin, for inviting me here.
Yeah. I always want to know more about AI. I think that's one of the areas that it's like you'll never probably know enough. And I know that you're really into one of the most fascinating parts of AI, which we'll get into in a moment. But I'm really curious from your take, what is it that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so right now like a thing like that I'm like the most passionate about probably at this point is my YouTube channel. So basically I'm kind of like trying to teach all things like in AI music, like in AI audio. And in that respect, I'm trying out like a lot of different things. And so some of these things are like generation of audio, like from like directly from raw audio. And this could be music or generating like music in a symbolic manner. I probably will get like into this like later on. But from a job perspective, I'm still in AI music, but from a kind of like more analytical side. So basically I'm extracting information from music, like genre, moods and stuff like that. And I'm working with a company doing like this type of stuff.
So AI music. So what is it that you're looking for when you are extracting data? That's like, I don't even know where to begin with the AI music other than like, I want to actually play music. So what are you trying to extract when you're saying you're analyzing music with AI?
Okay. So in that respect, like you can extract many different things. And so you can extract things that are like way closer to the score. For example, you can extract chord progressions, or you can extract a melody directly from a song, or you can try to extract or see like how like all the different drum patterns are there and try to transcribe them, right? Or you can try to extract things that are at a higher level in the score, or even on a perceptual level. Like, for example, extracting the musical genre of a song, or trying to guess who's the artist who composed that piece of music. Or you can extract mood, for example. And it's like all sorts of like things that you can do. And this specific like subfield of artificial intelligence, but I shouldn't call it a subfield of artificial intelligence, because AI is one of the things, is one of the parts that is part like of this field, is music information retrieval. So we extract information, retrieve information from music this way. But this is only like half of the AI music like landscape, because you have the other half, which is that of generation, and which is the part that I'm the most interested in, which is basically using artificial intelligence for generating music instead of analyzing it.
Yeah, but so you would probably have to start with the analyzing first, I would imagine, right? Like you have to understand the analyzing before you can start generating, or what do you feel?
It really depends like on how you approach the thing. But I would say that the two tasks are very much connected, right? So as you said, sometimes you want to analyze stuff first, and then that way you can also like build a data set that's like a tagged, labeled data set that you know, like, okay, so this music is in this genre, or this music or this piece has this chord sequences, and then you can leverage like that information, that data, for training models that will actually generate music instead of analyzing it. So it's kind of like a continuous feedback loop there.
Sure. I think that's one of the exciting things about AI, right?
Yeah.
So like, okay, before we get too much into the weeds with the technical stuff,
Sure.
And I don't know how much into the weeds we'll actually get. I'm actually curious as to like how you got to starting into doing AI and all that. Did you have a huge background in music and music theory? Did you go to college for music? Or were you in the sciences and you just wanted, and you love music like so many of us do? Like how did that progress?
Yeah. So basically, I have like a double background. So I still define myself a musician at the core, right? And I did like degrees in music composition, music like conducting, and piano performance. But at the same time, I've also studied science, so physics and astrophysics at degree level, and I've been programming since I was like a teen or a kid even. And have always been interested in artificial intelligence as part like of this interest in computers and programming. And so basically for me, at some point, I had to decide what I want to do with my life, right? So do I want to be a musician? Do I want to be a scientist? Or perhaps do I want to be a little bit of both? And that's what I opted to do. And so I went on and started a PhD in AI music, and so that I could kind of like combine these two passions of mine together. And and so this was like the start like of my career like in AI music, even though like I've been doing like some work since I was like younger than when I started like my PhD in that space.
Sure. And how long were you working on your PhD for?
I think it was like 3.5 years, something like that.
Great.
So,
And where did you end up studying?
so where?
Yeah, where?
Yeah. It was in the UK. So a University of Huddersfield, which is like in the northern part of England, near Manchester, between Manchester and Leeds. And it's a very, very nice university. They have a great music department. And the cool thing was that I had my main supervisor who was from music, and the other supervisor who was from computer science. And so I had like these two worlds, also like with my supervisor, and that was like amazing.
Wow, that's like perfect for you, huh? So it says on Twitter that you're in Berlin, Germany right now, but I don't.
Yeah.
I feel like you might have been in Italy recently too. Is that correct?
No, I'm still in Berlin.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. I'm in Berlin. I'm originally from Italy.
Yeah. Maybe that's where I got it mixed up. Yeah. Okay. So what brought you to Berlin from the UK then?
So when I finished my PhD, I had to take a decision. So do I want to like remain in academia and push my research career like at university, or do something else? And I decided to do something else, which was basically co-founding a startup, not surprisingly, in AI music. And the startup was called Melodrive. And I had a co-founder who also was from the UK, from London, Brighton, actually. And we had a third co-founder who was already living in Germany. And we thought that Germany perhaps would be a better place to be, because we know that like it's easy like here in Europe to attract people to Berlin, to attract talent. And indeed like that was the case, because then when we were like working like with a startup, we were able like to attract people really from all over the world here in Berlin, because like people love Berlin.
Sure. And Berlin has like quite a music scene too, right?
Oh yeah. It's quite amazing, and all sorts of like musical genres, musical styles, depending on what you love. You can find everything. Obviously, I am a lot into classical music, or like art music as they call it, right? And here we have like fantastic symphonies, symphonic orchestras and stuff like that, right? But also if you are into EDM, or techno, well, Berlin like is the place to be. And the cool thing is that like you also have a lot of creative people, and kind of like open offices where like people hang out and talk about music, technology. So it's very nice.
That's great. So the offices right now, though, I would imagine you guys are all working from home or pretty much remote at this point.
Yeah. Well, I no longer like work with my like previous company, like Melodrive, like the company that I co-founded. I just like moved on, and I'm working like for a company of Brussels, so Belgium. But of course, like it's all remote, and for obvious reasons, like these days. But
got it. Oh wow. Okay. So now, so with the company that you're working with, is it mostly generative models or?
No. So the company is called MusicMap, and they do like that other like part of AI music, right? So the music information retrieval. So basically, we are building like products that are able to analyze songs automatically and extract mood, extract voice qualities, or extract genres, all of these kind of things.
Did you say MusicMap?
A MusicMap. So it's music, like a music, and then map, like Google Map.
Is this it right here? What you see on the screen, music-map.com?
No. Nope. So if you want, I can't send you the link.
Yes, feel free. Post it in those comments there. I would love to see it. So wow, that's crazy. Okay, so getting back to like AI stuff, I know I get this question a lot. Oh, there we go. Music. Oh, got it.
MusicMap.
Yeah. I'm gonna share this with everybody. Let me just throw it in the comments. We look like brothers. That's funny. I have Italian in my background, so I think I'm about an eighth Italian in southern Italy as well. Or is that from where you're from, or no?
I'm from the center of Italy, really, Rome.
Okay.
So near Rome. It's not Rome. It's like a small city, or a small town, I should say, near Rome.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna pull this up real fast so others can see it. Yeah, that looks like it. I know it looks kind of funny right now. Let me put me full screen.
Of course.
There we go. So there it is. Interesting. That's pretty cool. I'll have to check that out a little bit more. So going back to like one of the most popular questions I get is, how do you actually get started with AI without it being way too daunting, especially in the music portion of things? Like if you wanted to, like myself, I really would love to emulate Ramin Djawadi and Hans Zimmer and have it generate these songs that last like 3-4 hours. So while I'm coding, it's almost like exactly those guys, but it's not their stuff. It's like maybe making music based off of how fast I'm coding, or like some facial features that are going on. Like maybe I'm really frustrated or something, and then it gives me some uplifting music. I mean, is that even possible? How would I even start going about doing that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long shot. We are not there by any means, but we are kind of like approaching that level of quality. So I think so it depends from where you come from, because like people who are doing research in generative music, AI music, usually come from two sides, right? So you have people who come from music itself. It could be music theory, musicology, or it could be like music cognition. So all of those like fields that are connected with music. And there you have like that these people obviously like need to learn a lot about programming, about AI. So there's like kind of like a steep learning curve like for them, right?
Sure.
And so sometimes like these people, so what they do is they may have like a bachelor's degree in music, and they move on and do a master's like in computing or music technology, and then perhaps they push like to the final level, like a PhD level, and there like they start like doing a lot of research like in AI and music like together, right? Sometimes like you have the opposite thing. So you have like people who come from computer science or who are just like programmers, and then they perhaps lack the musical side, right? The music side. And so what they do is they usually kind of like try to address that by learning a little bit more about music theory, or perhaps about like audio processing and all of these kind of things. But if I had to basically tell you what are like the most important things that you need to know like to be active in this space, to do research or to build products, I would say like AI like is obviously like extremely important. Then you have music theory and all the stuff that's connected to music, right? And then you have audio signal processing, so digital signal processing. That is like a big thing depending on what you are doing. So that is like the kind of like perfect triangle. And as I said, like you can have like people coming from all over the places. But the good thing like these days is that in English-speaking countries like the US, for example, or definitely the UK, you have universities that offer great courses, great like degrees about like this stuff at bachelor's level, at master's level, and definitely at PhD level. That's not necessarily the case in other countries. Like, for example, where I come from Italy, where like it's a little bit like more conservative, I would say, like the academic scene. So these kind of like combinations are like more difficult to have.
Got it. So both of those options, well, I don't really fit in both of those options, right? So I don't really come from a music background. I mean, I played music as a kid, but let's be honest, I don't remember any of that stuff. Music theory, I definitely want to ask you good resources you would recommend for learning music theory, because it's probably something more of us should know about anyway, because everyone loves music, and I would imagine understanding it better gives you a greater appreciation for it. But then the other side is, like, I have this technical background, absolutely, but the idea of enrolling in a university, whether it's for a graduate degree or a PhD, at this point in life is just not practical for me. But also it's not practical for, hundreds of thousands of people around the world to enroll in some of the universities, or like the one that you went to, right? So like, how do you get started without really being in this place of like, I have to go through the university path and all that?
Well, for that, there's the Sound of AI channel, right? So, I mean, that's like my YouTube channel. So and I think like
perfect plug.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons like why I started that is because, well, first of all, I love like teaching. I love like share like the stuff that I know, like, and build like a community that's interested in the stuff that I'm interested in. But I feel that like gap wasn't filled at all. So for example, in AI, also like on YouTube, you have a lot of people who are doing, I mean, like text analysis or image processing or video processing, but audio processing isn't that big of a thing right now, definitely not on YouTube, and music processing even less so. And so that's why like I started like this channel, just like to try to share and just like provide awareness like to people and give them like the tools like to learn more about like these fascinating topics. Besides that, I mean, the other like way like someone like you like may have is just like understanding like that you have like all of like these different kind of like buckets like to fill, right? So that of like the audio digital signal processing, AI, music theory, like this kind of stuff, and then just like try to find like books or courses like on it could be like a Udacity, wherever, like really, and just like building your own learning path. That is a little bit like problematic in the sense that you need to know what you don't know in order to become like proficient like with these things. And but then again, like if you think about like this three main like topics, main fields, that is probably what you should like focus on. So digital signal processing, AI, and if you are into if you want like to generate stuff, probably all the generative models, so GANs or variational autoencoders, that kind of like stuff, and then obviously like the music theory side.
Yeah, and for people who aren't aware of what a GAN is or a generative model, it's a type of AI that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Valerio, you're definitely more of an expert than I am, but it's a generative AI that essentially competes against itself until it actually starts to generate models. So it's almost like taking two models at once. One is making a prediction. The other one is combating against that prediction. Would that be be an okay way to explain
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so the whole idea here is that like you have like a generator that generates like it could be like an image, for example, right? Or it could be like a piece of music. It could be like whatever, like piece artifact that you want, and then you have like another like model that's basically like the discriminator, and the discriminator tries to guess whether like the image like is a real image, and by real I mean like something that's like in a human data set, for example, or it's been created by the generator. And you have like these two models like combating like each other, so that like when like the generator like gets better, then like the discriminator has to like become better at understanding whether like it's been fooled by the generator, like, and vice versa. And by doing this in an iterative way, like you'll end up like with a generator that hopefully will be able like to generate stuff that's going to fool the discriminator and you as a human being. And so you have like a new artifact that hopefully will look like just like a human artifact.
Sure. Wow, that's probably one of the most exciting areas of AI right now, I'd imagine. because this is in contrast to a classifier, which is just like, it's kind of like Shazam. If people have used Shazam, I'm sure pretty much everyone has, where it just guesses what song it should be or what audio signal that's coming in, right?
Yeah.
That's to me seems a lot more of a low hanging fruit to get started in this area. So how would you approach doing that if you have only like a basic Python background? What is like your first step in that?
Yeah. So what I would suggest doing is starting like with something simple. So for example, starting with a recurrent neural network, for example, right? And basically building a melody generator for that, or a chords generator. And so that is like a relatively simple task, because what you need to pick there is like understanding a little bit like the theory behind a recurrent neural network, and then understanding how you can like work with data and manipulate data and like use like those two things like together to generate stuff through a recurrent neural network. And that is like something that I think like it's quite easy like to start with. Whereas like if you had to start with a GAN or a variational autoencoder, well, I mean, there like the learning curve is a little bit more, because like there's a lot of theory like that goes like into that. So I would start like with things that are like a little bit like easier, so perhaps like CNNs or like RNNs, and then just after that like move like to things that are like more complex, because the complexity comes from two levels. So one like is the building like the model itself, but the other one is also like understanding the theory behind the model. And that is like something that I'm, for example, like I'm really keen on when I just like, yeah, teach stuff like on my YouTube channel, because I think like these two levels need to be there, because otherwise you're just like a hacker. There's nothing wrong like with that, but then it's going to be difficult for you like to change stuff and to know how the machine is going to respond based on the input that you're going to give it, right?
Right. So for me, I usually go from, I get something working and then I go deeper. Like I don't usually start at the bottom and then work my way up. I like to start at the top and then work my way down. So do you have like, are there libraries that are really easy to just jump in and start at the top, feed it some data, not really do a whole lot of processing, but just have a data set and then essentially hit train and out comes a model? Do you know of anything like that that people can start with?
Of course. There's, as I said probably earlier, there's a lot of research like right now in generative music, right? And so we have some very interesting models coming from also like from bigger companies, big tech companies like, I don't know, like Google, for example. And Google in particular has this amazing project that's called Magenta. And in this project, what they do is they develop models that can show some level of creativity, right? So they use it like for generating paintings or for generating music, for example. And they have a bunch of models that are already trained for like music generation. And so you can just like use those models and retrain stuff if you have like your own data set. And it's quite straightforward. And it's so straightforward that they package the whole thing into some plugins that then you can use as a musician in a DAW like Ableton Live. So it's basically like, it's quite straightforward, but at the same time, like it's nice because like you can just like, I don't know, like fire up Ableton Live, which is like this music production piece of software, and then import these plugins and then see how they work. And then if you want to go the extra mile, then you can just like go to the Google Magenta like code base. You can download, like you can pull from the repo, and then you can play around with the models that are already there. And those models will give you like a great insight into like how like this stuff works really.
Wow, that's really cool. So like the Magenta. So here's something that I would love to have myself, especially for like talks like this. I would love to have an AI that's listening to the talk and can transcribe it, and then also make clips with music on it. But I don't want to touch it. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of work to re-listen to something, pick out really interesting bits. Do you think that Magenta could at least help with the music portion of that?
Not necessarily at that level,
Okay.
because it's not creating music that adapts, really. So it's more, okay, so I may want to pass in like an initial musical idea. It could be like a simple melody, for example, or
Sure.
yeah, a drum pattern. And then the Magenta model can continue that, right? But it doesn't have necessarily a way of automating the part that I feel is the most interesting one, which is that of like adapting, right, the music based on the type of like content that you have. And that's the kind of research and development that we did back in the day at Melodrive. So we built like this AI music engine that not only generates music, but it does it in real time and adapts to the environment of a video game. So depending on the narrative that you have there, you can just like, or like this engine is able to shift the emotional state of the music accordingly. So yeah, and that was like a very, very interesting like piece of research like that we put into that thing, because I mean, already like generative music like is by no means like a solved problem. We're very far from that. But then like if you add on top of that these idea of like creating music in real time and adapting it depending on whatever like happens, then I mean the whole thing like becomes more complex. And so yeah, I think like it was like an amazing challenge.
It sounds like it. So did you guys just part ways? You needed to go on to different projects. Is that kind of what happened, or?
Yeah. So basically, like what we at some point, like we decided to do like that. It was it like with this project. So like after like we worked like on this one product for a couple of years, then we moved to like AI music consulting. So we did a lot of consulting with like music tech companies, entertainment companies in entertainment. But then like at some point we decided just like to that was it. So it's time like to move on to something else. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fascinating. So I was thinking it would be nice to have it understand the context, to adapt to the context. But I was actually more thinking like you just feed it a video and say, this is a podcast, and then it will kind of pick some songs that go well with a podcast type of thing. Not so much that it's going to listen to what we're talking about and then, I don't know the technical terms in music, but elevate to like, oh, this is like really motivational. So let's put some motivational music behind it, or this is really dreary and let's make it. I was more meaning like, can you just feed it a video and say, oh, there's a podcast, so use these kinds of sounds, and then it'll play with that, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Like that's a way easier problem to solve for sure. And you don't even need generative music for that, because it could be a search system, right? So you have like a large music catalog there, and then what you do is almost a kind of like a recommender system, right? So you just like know the context. In this case, it's not a user, but it's a context. And then you, depending like on the context that you have, the machine is going to pick like certain music that probably will work well in that context. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's really cool. So can you take tabular data then, so like a CSV file, if you will, and essentially predict a recommendation based off of that tabular data? So different features that you want to add, not just podcast, but two guys talking podcast, and two YouTubers, and two coders, and blah, 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 all these like features to it. And then actually predicting the best recommendation for that kind of sound based off of, I don't know, view time or something like that. You add a bunch of metrics into this tabular data, and then using that to make a prediction on the music that you would want to play along with it.
Yeah. I mean, like you can obviously do that, but there are like many different ways you can go with this. So like a very easy one would be, okay, so I have like a bunch of like different categories there. So I have like two people talking, right, in a YouTube video. Another one could be, there's only like one person like doing a monologue, right? Or like all sorts of like different video types. And then you would have like a relatively like simple like data structure there, right? Because like you just have like a bunch of different YouTube video types, okay?
Sure.
And as long as you have a data set which like associated music, right? So you're going to have like, I don't know, like 1,000, 10,000 like pieces of music. And then you say, well, this works well with a two guy talking type of video. And this like piece of music works well with, I don't know, like product type of videos or whatever like that may be. Then of course you can train a model and hope like to get like something that works like reasonably well. But you can go you can do this like in a probably like in a more complex way, and perhaps like in a way like that provides you like with results that are like more solid, more interesting. So how would you do that? Well, you could perhaps map different types of videos to different genres, right? And if you had like information about like a genre, if you had information about mood, now all of a sudden like you can create recommendations that are way more like tailored, because it may well be like that a person, I don't know, like you, Justin, like may like, I don't know, like EDM music. I may like, I don't know, like classical music, right? And so I don't want like for my videos to have EDM music, and probably you don't want for your videos to have like to feature classical music, but just like EDM, right? And so
Sure.
in that way, you would have like a better way like of filtering out of all the noise that you have, like with like loads and loads of like pieces of music out there. And this is a little bit like what the guys at like big music streaming companies like Spotify are doing, right? Of course, they're not doing that for YouTube videos, but they are using like a similar technology or like similar concepts and ideas to recommend the music that probably will be liked the most by their users. Are they being successful? Yeah, I would say like up to a certain point, yes, but obviously the technology is not perfect.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine with the recommender, if you could somehow pipe into the YouTube API as well. And I believe I have to check this, but I believe that the YouTube API, you might be able to add a music track to it at any time. So you just have your normal audio tracks and then add a music track to it, which if that's the case, I really hope it is. But if that's the case, then you could literally change the music based off of the traction of the video. Right.
Yep.
Like Tom Scott, he's a really famous YouTuber. He has a video that updates the count in the title, like how many times it's been viewed. And that's just through the YouTube API. It's not that big of a deal, really.
Right.
But this idea that really honing in that model based off of also what's consumed, I think is also fascinating. So you take in all the recommendations like you mentioned, but then you also add in how successful of a video it is to then fine tune those recommendations even more. I don't know, that sounds really fascinating to me. Maybe someday it'll come out, huh? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think like we are all in all, we're going towards this idea of personalization in content. And this is like a big one for AI and is, I believe, like a low hanging fruit, this one.
Yep.
What is not a low hanging fruit, like in the music space, is like the generative part. And indeed, today you see like that many companies like Spotify are using extensively this music information retrieval. So like the whole like analytical side of things, but not necessarily the other side, the generative part. That is still like something that a few startups are doing, and bigger company are just like doing for research purposes, but not for packaging products or stuff like that. But yeah, what you said like is really interesting, and I think like we are moving like slowly moving like towards like that thing. And even like you think of it like this way. Say for example, like you have like ads. So I mean, like the world like is based off ads, right? So I mean, YouTube, Facebook, Google, right?
Oh,
so,
advertisements, right? Yeah.
Advertisement. Sorry. Yeah. So now imagine that you can have advertisement or ads, right, that are targeted, and the music that you put in those, like, it could be videos, it could be just like audio ads, right? It's totally personalized, right? So Justin, again, like you, I assume like you like EDM, so let's say that. Okay, so and you are gonna get like your ad about like anything, I don't know, like new computers or whatever like that may be, which like EDM music. But for me, it would be with classical music, because I resonate more with that type of music, while you resonate more with the EDM like musical genre, right? And this is something like that. I mean, a few startups are working at the moment that I know of, and it's kind of like interesting because like it's this idea that content is going to be like personalized as much as possible, and music is going to play a huge role there, because obviously like music has like this emotional kind of like it's something that's very emotionally like charged, right? And it can really like make or break like a piece of content. It could be like a simple ad, or it could be like a film or like a YouTube video.
That just spurred so many ideas to me, the advertisements with music, because I'm thinking, let's say Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon, whatever it ends up being, ends up, instead of using these ads that are super interrupting of your experience, they just like flow really well into it. Kind of like if I started talking about an ad literally right now, it flows into the conversation. But then doing that with music, so you're working or you're studying or something like that, you're hearing music, and then it just goes like, here's an ad for, this coffee right here or whatever. Like that is really, really strange, a little bit scary to think that we will maybe start hearing more subliminal messages, even more so with these ads. I wonder what your thoughts are on how fine-tune it as individuals we would be, like pop-up ads or even ads on podcasts. Like, you get this feeling as soon as an ad's coming on, you're like, oh, here comes an ad. I need to skip this for 10 minutes or not 10 minutes, a few seconds, like, do you think that as people, we will be able to identify these generative music ads that come into our lives? Like, do you think that's going to be possible, or will we reach a point where that's definitely not possible?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, the whole like moving like from the content to the ad itself is going to be like quite seamless, I think, moving on. And that's, just like to give you an example, this is not like some technology that's too far ahead, because, for example, we already have products that are able to do quite a decent job at doing like automatic mixing, right? So you have like a DJ, for example, right? And the job of the DJ is that of like putting together like different tracks and knowing how and where to move like from one track to another in a seamless way, so that like the people who are dancing to the music don't necessarily notice like that they are like moving from one song to another, right? And we have like some products that are replicating that just by using digital signal processing, or in the most advanced cases, artificial intelligence. Now,
sorry, I just need to interrupt. So when you say digital signal processing, you just mean pretty much standard programming, not using machine learning at all. It's just literally processing the signel and making decisions, conditional decisions and stuff like that.
Of course. Like, it's
okay.
Basically just like using like it's like audio digital signal processing. Like, it's very close like to image signal processing, or right. And so you just like analyze the signal itself, and you have perhaps some heuristics or stuff like that. But there's no like magic. There's no like black box approach, because you have trained like a network or something like that. No, it's quite straightforward. So but these systems, even though like they are not necessarily super advanced in terms of like intelligence, right, or artificial intelligence, they're quite effective. They work quite well, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point over the next 2-5 years, we'll start seeing like all of this technology that now is only used in music in a kind of like entertainment setting being used in advertisement, right? Because there, I think like is where like the money is, like most of the time. And the point is like that making money or having like products that are very successful in the music space or music tech space is tough. So the idea of like using like this technology, but then readapting it to other markets where like it's way easier like to make money and to like make some profit is something that probably like many people will be thinking about.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you mentioned like creating this recommendation. Is there a service that you like to actually have pre-existing music that you can just use like in videos, or like basically the rights are waived, or what's the term? Where, it's like free use and stuff like that. Do you have services that you like using for those?
No. Well, the main point is like for my videos, I don't have music, and that's a little bit like of an oxymoron, a paradox, right?
That's funny, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't have like music in my videos, so that's not a problem that I have at the moment. But I know like of a few solutions, not necessarily. Well, I should say like that these are like not solutions that are similar like to the stuff that we've just discussed, but it's more like generative like music solutions. So like, for example, there was a company which was our competitor like back in the day at Melodrive, which it was like this generative music company called JukeDeck. And so they had these generative music models, which generate music like for your video. So you go there, you just like decide like the mood you want, like the music in, the length of the music, and I think like the genre and a few other parameters where you want to put like the climax of the music, right, in within like the duration of the track. And then like these like AI models would generate this music from scratch. And then you would probably pay, I don't think like you had to pay anything like if you didn't want like the rights like for that. I don't remember like the actual business model, but the main point was like that there was a solution, and there still is, like, because there are a lot of other competitors to JukeDeck like out there right now that are like providing this type of solutions. Now, what's the problem with that is that I would say the quality of the music, and by quality of the music mainly I am saying the actual audio production or sound production is not that great. It's not a pair with a human produced music, so there's still a gap there. And this is one of the reasons why generative music hasn't really like picked up that much. It's still like a niche thing that's probably going to be big, but no one so far has figured out how to like make money out of this, or make extensive money, right?
Sure.
Now, so just like to conclude on that, then I'm assuming that there are probably a bunch of like other like products that you can use like to find like your music. But if you go like in the traditional kind of like music catalog business, right? So you have a lot of like businesses like online that do this. So, but the thing is like that they are like very traditional in the way like you can like browse the music or just like get the music. There's not much AI involved in that process, and I think like that's definitely something that I don't know. Like I feel that's an opportunity because there's a huge gap there, and no one like is filling it.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Free Music Archive. Have you ever seen this site? Here it is right here. So it's royalty free music.
Okay.
But certainly the biggest challenge for me in using this for all kinds of purposes is searching through it. It's like it's just not going to happen. So I would love to have an AI that does that for me, based off of the genre or several other factors, right? But let's just say the genre itself, and maybe I can start tuning some sort of recommendation engine. So like, how would you even suggest I go about doing this? Like scraping obviously their archive itself for all the music, but then how do you actually even start analyzing it to make some sort of recommendation engine?
Yeah, of course. There, what you would do is probably use some kind of like it's called like content-based recommendation, right?
Yep.
And what that means is that you are extracting information directly from content. You are not using other type of information that comes from the user, right? And so what you would do there is like you would have like all of this music catalog, right? And then you would analyze that catalog and extract information from that. And that is like connected to what, like, for example, we do at MusicMap, right? What you would do like is extracting like the mood of the music,
Sure.
right? You would extract the genres that you have like in the catalog. And for each track, you would extract the BPM. So that's like the tempo, the speed of the music, right?
Right.
You would also extract other information, perhaps like the instrumentation, right? And now, sorry,
Oh, I was going to say, so extracting that information, are you using Python for that, or how do you actually go about extracting that? And if you are using Python, which libraries do you recommend?
Okay. Yeah. So there are like a few like open source libraries that you can use like for that. But the thing is like that most of these libraries work at as what we call like in music processing, like low level features. Like for example, like musical onsets. So what's a musical onset? It's a note, right? So when you have like a note and you say, okay, here I have a note. Yeah, here I have like a musical event, and I have like a pitch, which is like the frequency, and I have like a duration, right? So at this level, we still have like a bunch of like open source things out there. Like for example, Librosa is a library that's like fantastic to use for these purposes, or Essentia. But it's more difficult to have higher level, or I should say, like models that extract higher level features, like genre or moods. And there are a bunch of reasons for this. So first, because like the community and all of these libraries like come from a signal processing approach most of the time, right? And now it's only been like over the last like 5 years at most that like AI has been like included like in this stuff. But at the same time, you need to, so like mood extractors like can be like different, or genre extractors. It really depends on like your definition of the genres, right? And your definition of moods, and it depends also on the catalog that you have. So in order to like extract the genres like in a way like that makes sense, you have to like analyze music which is similar to the data that you've used for training like those like genre classifiers, right? And it's the same thing like for mood extraction. So in that respect, what you would do is build your own model, your own mood classification system, or your own genre classification system that's tailored to the way you describe the problem. And by that, I mean the way the kind of like taxonomy, emission taxonomy that you use. Perhaps you want to use like a categorical approach. So what that means is that you're going to have like a few labels. So this music is either happy, sad, or I don't know, something else, a couple of other like emotions, right? Or you may want to use like a more nuanced approach where you have like values that are a continuous values. So for example, you can represent emotion on a two-dimensional space using like a couple of axes. So one is called like a valence, the other one is called arousal, and this basically means valence is like positivity. So high valence signifies that, means that you are like in a happy mood, like something, an emotion that's positive, whereas like low valence is the other thing. It's like in a sad is low valence. Arousal is the energy level, right? So if I'm super happy and super excited, I'm high, I'm in a high arousal mode. If I'm sad, I'll be like in a low arousal situation. Now, this way of like representing emotion can be done in a continuous way. So you're going to have like a continuous value from 0 to 1, like for arousal and for valence, right? And this is another way you can represent emotion, right? So all of this to say that there are many different ways you can set the problem itself, and it really depends on what you want to achieve and what you have in mind for your customers, if you are like building something for that is going to be used by users or customers. Now, the final thing that I want to add here is that, of course, now you have like this idea. So you know like what problem you want to solve. You know like the taxonomy. Now it's time to build the classifier. So how do you do that? Well, Python is the way to go, because like, I mean, all AI stuff most of the time is done in Python. And then we have like some amazing libraries here. So you can use PyTorch, for example, or you can use a TensorFlow or Keras, which is an API built on top of a TensorFlow, which is the kind of like tensor engine that does all the heavy lifting like for you, right? And so, yeah, definitely like Python is the way to go, but it's a little bit like a long shot to arrive at something like that works, but it's definitely something that is cool. It's a great like learning process, or also like if you want to go through like the whole path.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks. I mean, So this is where I get sometimes, especially with music, is it's like daunting to even get started. Like you gave out a lot of information, and I think your YouTube channel really will help someone who's going to push through and actually do the audio side. Because in my own experience, it's like you really need to want it. If you don't want it, you're going to stop pretty quickly.
Of course.
So have you done AI outside of music? Have you done other things that you just were like, this is not for me?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like my main focus is on AI music, but I've been doing like AI audio, like because obviously like audio is more than just music, right? So for example, some stuff that I did there was anomaly detection. So you can kind of like predict whether a machine is malfunctioning by just listening to its sound, its noise. This is like something really cool. Now you can use like audio in all sorts of like other situations. So I'm currently working on a video that's gonna review this paper that came out like I think like last month or something like that. Basically, like they are using audio, the sound of coughing, the sound of your cough, forced cough, to predict whether or not you have COVID, right? This is like incredible and it's super powerful. So I mean, like the possible like applications like of the audio technology are really, really interesting. Now, to just go back to your question, whether like I've done like work like outside of like audio, like in music. Yes, I've done some of that. I've done like work like in like working like with like analytics on all of like that kind of like tabular type of data. And I would say like it's definitely not my thing. So I do it. I enjoy doing it like up to a certain point, but I mean, like I have like this big passion like for audio and music that it's difficult for me just like to go out because there's so much like to discover, to research, and to explore just like in that tiny island, which is like music processing or music generation, for example. And then something else that I did was like also like some AI in kind of like image processing. But then again, like it's something like that I enjoy doing. And then of course, like if you have like strong basis like in AI, then it's relatively like simple like to switch like from one domain to another. And if you happen to have like a strong like foundation or background in digital signal processing, then it's really not that different working like with audio that is like working with images. So yeah, it's something like that I've done. But I mean, if I can like avoid doing that and just like focus on audio and music, I'm more happy. I would say.
Totally. So I guess this is a dilemma I think I face as well. It's like the teaching part. So
Right.
Why is it that you're teaching and not building all of these things and just making a company out of that and just really focusing on that so you can just only work on the audio AI or the music generation AI, or any piece that you're really, really interested in? Why not just do a company on those things?
Okay. Yeah, this is a great question. Now, and I think like this comes back a little bit to like, I would say like my mindset when I started Melodrive, right? So there I was like laser focused on the company itself, right? On the product. And it was like the first time I was creating a company, right? And being a person who comes from the technical side of things, I wasn't really like that interested, I would say, like into like more like the business side, right? And so I would push a lot like on the research, development, and product. And at the same time, I was like in this like Silicon Valley kind of like mindset. So just go like get money, like build the product, and then like people perhaps, hopefully, will come. But then like I realized like that this was like a huge, I would say like a huge guess or a huge bet, I should say, right? So there was like no certainty that this thing like is gonna like really work. And basically like at a certain point I had like a switch, right? Because of like a number of reasons like and issues that I had like with the company itself. And I realized that really like I think like the most important thing is that of like building a community first, I think, like, if you want to build like any type of product, right? It could be like a generative music system. It could be like a banking product or finance, a product like in the financial market, right? You need to have a community. At the same time, I was really missing the stuff that I did at university when I was like a PhD student back in the day. So teaching and sharing knowledge. And so I thought, okay, why don't we try like going back to teaching? But I'm not really interested in going back to university. Why don't I have like a YouTube channel where I can teach like to so many people? And so, and I think like that started like as a necessity for me, just like to share like the knowledge and give back to the community initially. But then I saw like that people were kind of interested, right? And one thing like led to another. Of course, like the channel is like a very little channel, right? I have like less than 10,000 subscribers, but still like it's a very like nice community. So we now have like a Slack group, and there you have a lot of people who are like helping each other out, and it's very like nice to see. Now, with all of this, where do I want to get at? Well, the point is that I believe like that before I get back to like building like a product, I think like I want to have like a strong community. I want to build like products around communities rather than like building a product first and then hoping that I'll find like someone who buys like that product, right? And
Sure.
I've also like grown a little bit skeptical about like the usual kind of like Silicon Valley like mindsets, in the sense, okay, go like get a lot of money, build, and then invest a lot of money in marketing and stuff like that once you've built stuff. No, I want to take it like the other way. So I want to build a community first, and when I know that I have like a valuable a community like that's strong enough and that's interested in what I'm doing, then perhaps go back and build a product and perhaps monetize that as well.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense, because one of the things about establishing a community, especially with what you're doing, is it is incredibly niche right now, which I think is a huge advantage to what you do. But the other thing is, if you try out a project and you already have this community that's on your side that you're a member of, you try out that project, the project fails. Well, the community is not going to hate you. They're going to be rooting for you. They're going to be wanting you to win. So the product might go away, but the community will hopefully stay intact. Of course, as long as you're like ethical and not lying and making stuff up, but I can't imagine anyone like yourself doing something like that. But, I think that's a really clever way to go about doing it. I will say one of the things that shouldn't necessarily be overlooked for you, though, is the fact that right now is maybe a really good time to get investors for what you're trying to do, since it is so niche, but yet the implications are so big. So some food for thought. I'm sure you've already thought about that a lot. The other thing is having the community being a part of building your product or service, whatever it ends up being. I think that's really cool. It's like it's tricky to figure out exactly what you're going to end up doing, and it sounds like you've got it worked out. So good for you on that.
Yeah, I think like, and the other thing is that you can do like really cool stuff. So like, for example, like this week, I've announced like this new project, which is going to involve like the community actively. And it's something like completely crazy that I could have never done hadn't I had like a community like this. And it's basically like this idea of how it's called like open source research. And it's a open source research project. And we're going to be building like or putting together a piece of AI music research and then hopefully publish it at a conference, right? And this is like, I feel like I'm in a privileged position because I can do something like this. Because say, for example, I'm at a university. Well, there, like the whole mantra is like publish or perish, right? And so you wouldn't come out saying, hey guys, why don't we have like 100+ people, 200 people working on a piece of research together, and then we'll publish and we'll credit everyone, right? You can't do that, because obviously like the whole point of the way like you grow within like the academic like career is by like publishing a lot. Whereas like with a YouTube community, like the one that I'm like slowly like building, you can do that. So you can try out like this crazy stuff. And now the cool thing is that I hope like that people are gonna have like a blast like throughout like the process, because I have like a lot of like people who are like students like at university or like machine learning like practitioners or programmers who want to try like the research like side and see how it feels like to be a researcher. And that's going to be like a great like a learning opportunity for them. But at the same time, I have like this privileged like position where I can try out something that has rarely been tried before. So is it possible to do research in a way that's similar to the open source software philosophy, right? Is it like any good? So can people with totally different backgrounds and totally different levels of expertise work together towards a common goal and create something that's valuable? So yeah, just like to say that I think like that this whole like YouTube like journey that I've been having like now like for a year, it's just like something amazing and completely unexpected.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's because you're putting out good stuff, and you're obviously very passionate about it. So people feel that. I think that's important. And the other thing is too, what you're saying about your research. You get 100 people on there. Who knows what it's going to be like in 10 years? Maybe it's going to be thousands of people for all kinds of research areas that are going to be a big part of that.
Of course.
Because it seems like, and you can definitely speak on this a lot more, but it seems like academia is going to have to change a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, because people aren't going into universities, and who knows like physically going into the universities. Sure, it's happening still, but who knows what it's going to be like in 2 years if this COVID thing doesn't go away. Universities are going to have to change a lot. But it's actually surprising to me that, given that we've had the internet for so long, why isn't that universities, especially with their research, why aren't they reaching out to the internet at large? And what more, like, why doesn't that happen?
Well, I think there's someone who did a little bit of this stuff in the past. So it's called like open research or open science. But the idea there is that you have researchers, like lead researchers who are like the scientists and who do like most of the job, right? But then they just outsource or crowdsource, I should say, little like bits and pieces. But like the people who contribute to the research are going to have like just like a minor role there. They're not gonna say where like the research like should go, or just like negotiate like all the different points like in the research. And obviously, like as a human like endeavor, like in research, you always have like to negotiate stuff, negotiate like what the topic of the research, and negotiate like the approach that you'll use, the evaluation, whatever. And so it seems like that it's always been like very like top down. What I want to experiment like is the other way. So like this like bottom up approach. But now to get back to your question, why hasn't this happened more often? And I think like, again, it's connected with like the main currency that you have at university and academia, which is just like publishing, right? So publication is like the main currency that you have in academia. And that's not a good thing. And this is one of the reasons why I left academia, and I didn't want like to remain like in that environment. And that's because what I've seen happening is like people trying to put out as many papers as possible, regardless of the research quality, right? It wasn't like the focus on the quality, it was more the focus on the quantity. No matter like what we like research and what we create, the whole point is just about like putting that out. Now I know like that this is like a little bit like of an extremization. It's not always like this. It really depends like on the different researchers like that you happen like to collaborate with. But I think like the way like the whole system is structured is just like kind of like pushes you towards like quantity, not quality. And this also threatens like the impact that you can have like on the larger society, right? And I think like for me at least, like the having like a positive impact on society, and or at least just like having some level of impact has always been like a key thing. And I couldn't find this like at academia, in the academic environment.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I guess outside of the academic environment, you can do you can make your own rules and choose what you want to do and work on the things that are interesting to you at the depth that you want, right?
Yeah, but I think like it's not like a problem regarding like the type of topics that you can work on in academia, because I think like if there's like an upside of working like at universities, that one, right? That usually like if you have your position, as long as you do like a little bit of teaching, then you're free to do like research. As long as you publish, you can do whatever you want. Obviously, as long as it remains like within the fields, right? Or like your department. But so that's not necessarily a problem. The problem is more on the actual output and and that.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. So switching back to the AI stuff and actually getting into making it happen yourself, where do you recommend people should go for creating their own data set? Like how do you approach creating a data set, especially for music or audio? Like, are there tools out there? Do you just throw them in a folder, label the folder, and put a CSV file together? Or how do you go about doing that?
Okay, so if you're asking regarding like where to find data sets, right? So that is
actually what is your approach to creating your own data set, not necessarily finding others? We could talk about the finding too, but definitely the creating part first.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it really depends on the problem itself and like the level of depth that I want to like dig into, like that's the problem, right? So if I'm doing like a YouTube series, like most of the time I'll just like download a data set and I'll use like whatever like I get like from like the internet, right? So that's going to be like probably like CSV files like or JSON files or stuff like that. But in other situations, like what I'll do, well, and that happens, like, for example, if you are like working with audio files, like WAV files or MP3s, so you just like get the tracks, right? And then you should like analyze those tracks. And most of the time what we do is we extract so-called spectrogram, right? And which is a way of like converting a waveform, an audio file into an image-like piece of data, right? And so, and there, like what I would do is just like build like the data set in a manner where like I can just like map all the different like spectrograms that I have like to the labels that probably I received directly like from the data set itself. And for that, what I would do is just like automate the whole thing and have like perhaps like a JSON file where I can just like map stuff like that. But so this is like in a more like casual kind of situations, or where I have just like to create like a I don't know, like a YouTube series. And I mean, it's not a product, it's not something that should go in production. But then of course, if I have to go like in production, what I will do is work like with actual like databases, right? And so it could be like SQL databases or like NoSQL databases. And there you have like a similar approach, in the sense that what you would do is like analyze like all of the tracks. So if you're dealing like, for example, with audio files, and then like extract the spectrogram, and then have like the features that you extract and the information that you extract stored like in data sets, and having like your labels there as well, so that then you can easily like train your models. But basically like fetching the information from a data set, and perhaps like at that point you can also just like kind of like put it like in a simple like CSV file like at that point, and then just like train stuff.
Sure. So so much of it is just using Python and a lot of the open source tools. There's not like a Photoshop like thing that you download and you can label all this stuff. I've seen that there's a lot more for images now. There's been quite a few that have come out, and even like OpenCV has a partner that they work with that looks like a really promising tool for labeling image data sets. So spectrograms, you mentioned earlier about analyzing someone's cough to determine whether or not they have COVID, right? So would the process of that would it be just a bunch of spectrograms that are labeled COVID or not? And then, that's essentially through convolutional neural network or recurrent neural network, and classify new audio signals that are coming in. That's essentially what they're doing. Or
highest level possible, yes, that's more or less like what's happening. So you start from just a waveform, so basically an audio file, so of your sound coughing, right? You extract spectrograms from there, and in the case of the paper that I'm analyzing and that I am reviewing right now, they're not using spectrograms. They're using another type of feature that's called Mel frequency substral coefficient. So this is like I would say like a more perceptually informed feature than a normal spectrogram, right? So we put some domain knowledge like into that, so that it makes sense. So basically this feature reproduces the way we perceive sound, we perceive audio, music, right? Now, but at the end of the day, you're going to have like a similar type of like image. It's going to be like a two-dimensional like image, if you will, right? Then you have like this image, and then what you do, you use like a bunch of like CNNs, RNNs, and stuff like that, and it's a simple like binary classifier in this case. So you have a data set, a labeled data set, where you have like the sound of all of this like this cough sounds, and then besides each of the different sounds, you're gonna have whether or not like this patient was like infected with COVID or not, right?
Yeah.
But in the case of this like one paper, I think like they did something amazing, which was something like more complex than just using a simple CNN or like a ResNet or just like using like just a simple convolutional neural network. So what they did was basically using a bunch of different networks pre-trained on other use cases, and then they did like a transfer learning. So basically they use as a basis like this networks trained on other tasks, and then they did an extra level of learning like on top of that with the COVID data set, and they got out like some amazing results. And the whole thing like that really like blew my mind is like that it was really what worked really well was this combination of total like black box approach, CNN kind of like machine learning approach, deep learning approach, where you don't know what's going on inside the algorithm, but at the same time you had all of this information that was like kind of like packaged within like those different networks, because like you had like the authors had to use domain knowledge to understand what would be an interesting feature to extract and to build upon to get like a better result. And so you had like these two levels, so the machine learning on the one side and the pure machine learning, and then like the domain knowledge and understanding which learned feature could be the best to get like a better outcome there. Just like to give an example to make it a little bit more concrete. So there like this like different networks were focused for example on extracting information about like your vocal cords, and because like when you have like a respiratory issue like COVID, your vocal cords are going to sound slightly different, and so that was one thing. And then they used like also like the respiratory tract, so your lungs, and listening basically like to your lungs and how like your lungs sound like different depending on whether or not you have a respiratory disease. And the thing that really blew my mind was that there was also like this other network that was focused on sentiment, because apparently when you have like a neurodegenerative disease or like something like that that leads you towards like some level of like neurodegeneration, and COVID unfortunately does that while you have it. So you tend to have like a mood that's more I don't know, like you get frustrated, you get like angry and something like that, right? And so what they did was analyzing like speech and recognizing like moods, and they could use like those features to predict COVID, which is quite amazing.
And did that end up resulting in one model, or?
Yes. Yeah. It was like kind of like combined model. It's a parallel model, right? So you had like these three models like in parallel, and then you would like concatenate like the results there, and then have like some kind of like global average pooling, just like to arrive like at the final like layer that is just like a switch, whether like you have COVID or you don't have it. Like,
so do you have something that on your channel right now that shows how to combine multiple different models for a result like that? I haven't actually seen that executed, and I know that, or at least I'm pretty confident that that's what Tesla does as well for their self-driving, including I think they do some audio processing as well. In the self-driving case to know proximity to things and all that. So do you actually cover how to combine those things, or?
No, I don't have like a video or like a series of videos on that, but I'll definitely like cover something like this. I did some, obviously, like a lot of research like in this space, like combining like different types of networks like that or I should say like sub networks that focus on like different aspects. We can call this some kind of like multimodal learning, if you will, right?
Sure.
So you have like different like sub models that focus like on different aspects of the problem, and then you concatenate everything, and then hopefully you will get like a better result. But this isn't necessarily something that's super new, because it's connected with also like this idea of like a ensemble learning, or just like having like an ensemble machine learning models. What this means is basically combining the results of the predictions that come from different models. But what happens like usually in ensemble like models like this is that you have like the all of these predictions that come out from the model, and then you have like some way of like aggregating those results, but it's a kind of like post-processing phase, this one, right?
Sure.
So one of, just like to give an example here, say for example you want to detect mood, right? And you only have like two moods like in a piece of music, either happy or sad, right? And then you have like three different models, right, that do like mood detection. You get the output, and each of these models are going to say this piece of music is happy or it's sad. And what you would do like to have better performance is just like combine. And then in this case, you would say, okay, so I would get like the so if all the three models like agree that like a piece of music is happy, then I'm quite sure that this is like a happy song. But I could be in a situation where like one model isn't doing like really that great, and it says like sad when it is happy. But then I have like other two models that are saying happy, and so still I'm improving my like performance rather than just like going with a simple model. Obviously, this has like a kind of like a downside of being like more computational expensive, but
yeah. So that's just another approach to solving that same thing, right?
yeah, it's just like an approach to have like I mean like a better results, because the idea is that the three different models are different. So perhaps you may have like a support vector machine for doing like classification, then you may have, I don't know, like some kind of like random forest, whatever, and then a neural network, and then you'll do this kind of like voting where like the different models like will vote, and then you would aggregate the results to understand what is like the most likely prediction there.
Got it. And what is that called when you do those three different models and you do the voting process?
I mean, like you can call it like ensemble models, right? So
Okay.
that's basically the idea. So you have like an ensemble, and you combine together like different models in one way or another. And there are different ways like you can go about that. But what like these other guys did with the COVID thing and cuffing is a little bit different, because like the processing happens directly inside the network there, right? So the network already has like those submodels.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's AI is just so fascinating. There's just
yeah. It's really cool, and I think like it's gonna become even cooler, like moving like down the line, like in the future, because I think like the next big step is going to be that of trying to combine the deep learning, the machine learning, with some kind of like symbolic AI that comes from the past, because like symbolic AI was like where we came from, right? Using like symbols and manipulating symbols, but then like the machine learning like came in, and then we have like this super huge revolution with deep learning. But I'm convinced that when we can reconcile these two worlds, we're going to have like something even more powerful than what we have now. One of the reasons I'm saying that is
I didn't interrupt you. I'm a little confused. What do you mean by symbolic AI versus deep learning AI? What's the difference?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So symbolic artificial intelligence, what we do is we may have like rules, for example, right? So in the 80s, you had like these AI systems, which were rule-based systems or called expert system. So for example, for diagnosing something, like if you have like flu or whatever, you would have like all sorts of like different rules, like that say, okay, so if you have like fever, it's likely that you have like flu. If you have like fever and you have like these other like symptom, it's likely that you have like this disease instead of like this other one, right? And so basically what you would do is like taking like knowledge and then trying to model knowledge in a formal way with symbols. And then you would have like algorithms that can reason with those symbols and come to conclusions. But that is all symbolic in the sense that you have like symbols that have like a certain meaning for you as a human being.
Sure.
Whereas when you are like in the deep learning, like neural network, like a world, well, you don't have like almost like any of that. So you have a completely black box approach where you put in, say, for example, like a spectrogram, and then the AI does like the neural network does like some magic, and then you get a yes or no. Like this is like a happy song or this is like a sad song, but you don't have any idea of how like the AI arrived like at that prediction, right? And so what I'm saying is that possibly like in the future, a very interesting line of research will be to recombine like these two worlds. In other words, making deep learning easier like to understand. And this is like something extremely important. So for example, like in the health, in like for medical diagnosis, right? So it's important not only that you have a system that can tell a doctor whether you have COVID or you don't have it, but also explain why the system thinks that you have COVID or you don't have it, right? You need that thing that's called explainability.
Yeah.
And so this is like a big problem in deep learning right now, because we may have systems that are better at predicting whether you have a certain disease than human doctors, but at the same time, they're not necessarily used because they lack completely explainability. And that's a big, big problem, because we don't trust machines just by themselves, right? We need to be sure, right? And we need to understand how they reason.
Would you say at this point, if a machine was to diagnose some sort of medical issue, it would then be up to the doctor to confirm that diagnosis and then explain it essentially at this point? And what you're talking about is in the future, we'll have an AI that not only makes the diagnosis, but also can explain it,
yes,
maybe more accurately than the doctor could even.
Yeah, I think like that's the main thing. And then I think like it's important. So there's this like big thing like in AI, or just like, I mean, UX, if you think about it, which is like you have to trust the machine.
Sure. Yeah.
You have to trust like, and this like is absolutely true for recommendation. So like, for example, I think like one thing that's completely missing from like music streaming services and recommender, like for example on Spotify, is explanation, right? So why are you saying that I should listen to this music? So and I think like that's extremely important. And obviously it's important in entertainment, but I mean, it's not the end of the world if we don't have explanation there. But the same thing has like paramount importance in a health situation. You need, as an AI, as a machine, you need to convince the doctor that like what you predicted is sound, so that the doctor can just oversee like the whole process and say, yeah, I think like that's the right call, right?
Sure. Because the explanation of like, oh, from all of our data, this is why it is predicting this. That doesn't tell somebody a whole lot. Just like the music, right? As soon as I heard you say that, I think of like Amazon's recommendation engine. A lot of times it'll say this is recommended for you because of other people I bought this product, or because of this author, or whatever it ends up being, right?
Of course.
And that probably nudges a lot more people. I know it has for me into at least looking at whatever that thing is that they're recommending to you. But it would be really nice to see that in music, where it's like, oh, you really like this particular artist, this tempo, and while you were coding last week, both of those things, you were really productive, and so this is why we're recommending this to you. I can't wait until those sorts of things happen. That would be really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there, I think like what you will establish with the machine is a trust relationship, right? Yep. So, and when that happens, the great thing is that all of a sudden you'll start accepting recommendation that not that great, really, because obviously like the whole like recommendation like field or problem is not an objective one. There's a lot of subjectivity, and definitely if you're dealing with like subjective stuff like music or films or whatever. So if you earn the trust of the user, then the user is going to be more willing to accept recommendations. And one way of earning that trust is through explaining why you do certain things. And if you think about it, this is like something that's, for example, also Netflix is doing. So if you go like when you go into Netflix, like their main like dashboard or thing is just like a big recommendation-based web page, right? And then they will tell you, well, you watch this video, so or you watch this film, so probably you'll like this, or like this, or like the films that currently are the most watched, or stuff like that. So they explain why they're kind of like throwing at you like these movies.
And so do you think the explanation comes from using symbolic artificial intelligence, or is there another method that we'll figure out?
I think like right now we don't necessarily need that like for like explanation. So you, for example, like in recommender systems, right? So you have the content-based recommendation, and so there you already know the content itself, right? So you know that this piece of music is in a progressive rock genre, or this piece of music is in a sad mood, right? And so you can leverage that information. But if you want to have like a system, like a system that only uses like a deep learning or stuff like that, then you're not gonna get like this type of information today. And this is like, as I said, like many lines of research like today are trying to address that problem. And so what I'm hoping will happen is like this kind of like combination, reconciliation of like these two worlds, like the symbolic one and the more like deep learning driven one. And and that would be like a great moment, I believe. And from what I've seen, like there are a lot of papers that are pushing like in that direction, even if like it's only like in an early stage kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Cool. That's really exciting. So switching to more abstractly, I guess, do you think that AI is going to completely replace musicians? Maybe not anytime soon, but let's say at some point in the future, we'll have AIs that are so advanced that musicians or playing music will just be kind of a hobby that some people do, but the vast majority of people around the world listen to AI generated music that's generated probably for them.
I think this is never going to happen, to be honest. And I'm very happy that this is the case. And why is that the case? Because music is not just the music itself. So the relationship, so music is about like building a relationship with certain artists, right? And having like following them, understanding like where they come from, and sharing like their experience, their background, their feelings like with you. And so there's a level there that like an AI is never going to be able like to replace, which is that of like the human touch, the human reasoning, right? And the human relationship. And so this is like something similar, for example, like to what happened like back in the day with chess, right? So back in 1995 or 1996, we had like IBM Deep Blue, which defeated Garry Kasparov, the late chess world champion, right?
Yep.
And well, people at that point thought, well, it's done. I mean, why should we keep playing chess if we have like machines, chess machines that are like our overlords, right? But still today, chess is played by everyone, right? And well, not by everyone, but I mean, like by the community, like is also like growing quite a lot. I'm in that community as well, and I've seen like over the last couple of years, like growing like exponentially, really. And we have like machines that can beat anyone right now. But why do we play chess? Well, we play chess because we love like the feeling of playing chess. We love the idea of like I don't know, like sharing like the chessboard with another human being and having like the thrill of playing against like another human being and sharing like those emotions like together, right? And so right now you have like this crazy situation where you have like the typical like human chess world championship on the one hand, and you have like chess world championship that are only like for AIs, right? And they're completely separate and they're super interesting. And now the great thing is that you have this activity, which is basically some kind of like cross-pollination from AI towards like machine, towards humans and the other way around. So people are kind of like transforming the way they play chess based off the advancements that we have in AI. And then we have like certain chess players who are helping out AI developers to build like better chess machines, chess algorithms, right? And I think like something like this is definitely going to happen with music. And the great thing about music is that like differently from chess, there's no win or lose, right? It's all subjective. So there's never going to be a point where we'll say, yeah, this machine is better like than humans at composing music, because there's no scale, right? And so where I think like machines and AI will play a huge role is in doing stuff that human composers can't do. So, for example, that idea that I shared like today, that vision that we had of Melodrive. So, basically, creating music that adapts second by second to a video, to a piece of interactive content like a video game, where you don't know what's going to happen like in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. There, you may have like this combination of a composer who creates a music script, which then gets read by the machine, which can implement it in real time and create an infinite version of it that's going to create a unique experience for each of the players, for example, in a video game. So yeah, I think like that's where like AI is going to shine, and this like it's going to just like be like a better world for composers and better tools for composers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do like that take on what you think the future is going to be like. I mean, I also the human element that you mentioned with chess, something that I personally feel, which I haven't been able to feel in a while, but actually being at a concert, right? Or just live music in general.
Of course.
It doesn't have to be a concert. It could be at a coffee shop and they're just playing live music. Even if the song isn't as good as some of the songs that I really enjoy, something about live music, there's just this connection that you don't get from recorded music. And when I say live, I mean they're actually playing it, not that they're playing a song over a loudspeaker or something like that. I can't say the same is true for digital music like EDM, like you mentioned before, but certainly like a guitar or piano or something like that. When you feel that, or when you're in the presence of that with somebody who's amazing at it, it's like nothing else. It's like it's a weird connection, like you were saying with chess. Is this weird human connection, or maybe it's not weird, but it's just a very human connection that's happening, that it's hard to imagine a machine doing that. And it's sort of, for whatever reason, makes me think of, I believe it was either Jeremy Howard or Andrew Ng that said, like, I don't want my toaster falling in love with my vacuum cleaner, or something along those lines, right? Because they talked about love, and to me that's like connection, right? So like it seems like there will be a disconnect almost always with a purely machine built creation, because it's always going to be emulating something that another human has done. and I mean, it goes to even people just exactly copying what machines or what other people have done. So like somebody copying a Michelangelo work of art is still not Michelangelo's work of art, right? It's like you still appreciate, or as humanity, even if you personally, but as humanity, we still appreciate Michelangelo's work of art, or Leonardo da Vinci, or all of these great artists. We still appreciate that, or your musicians, right? Like Mozart and all of these classical music. All these guys way better than I do. But the idea that a machine's going to come in and somehow replace that, it might feel a little bit more like a pipe dream. So even what I was mentioning before, where I had like these videos that were automatically clipped for me and they play all this music, perhaps that will be cool, but maybe it will miss the human element that needs to happen, right? Maybe it doesn't need to be perfect. And maybe this is one of the biggest problems with self-driving cars as well, is there is this human element that when I'm walking across the street and I see the other person driving, I can be like, hey, I'm with my 2 little kids. We make eye contact. All right, cool. We're good. Versus if nobody's sitting in the driver's seat, similar like if there's nobody sitting at the piano, maybe it's just we're missing that human connection, and perhaps that will be always the case. And really what will happen is our AIs will just augment what we can do.
Yeah.
It will make us that much better. So when you are driving with a self-driving car in there, you can go 200 miles an hour on the freeway or the highways, and feel really, really safe and secure, because you still have a machine, like the symbiosis that's happening in there. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, but I do like hearing your take on where you think are going, especially how it relates to chess, because that's an important piece too. I remember hearing about that when I was a kid, that it's like, oh, now nobody's going to play chess. I'm like, I don't care. I don't want to just get destroyed from a machine. I want to play my friend and beat them, or have them beat me, and we just go have this back and forth, and it's more of a fun thing for me, or for us to connect, right?
Yeah, so I think you made a couple of great points there, I think. So one is the connection that you establish with performance, live performance. Think about, for example, jazz music, right? So you have these guys who actually create music on the fly, just like Melodrive did, but like in a human setting. And there you have like this magical situation where, in a sense, like these guys are reacting and interacting with the crowd, right? So that level of connection between the performer and the audience is just like something magical, and you can't reproduce that. There's no way, and there's no need to reproduce that, right? So that, I think, like is the main thing. And that it's not, I think, like it's not only related to like the live performance setting, but it also like kind of like it resonates also like in the relationship that people establish with the artist like they love. For example, like I don't listen to a lot of like I would say like popular music, but I really love like progressive rock bands like from the 70s, right? Pink Floyd like is a big one that I love, and I feel I have like this huge relationship, like very deep relationship with the band members and with that music. And had the music been composed by an AI, probably I wouldn't have like that feeling, right? Because like I know like the story like of these guys, the story like of the main songwriter like Roger Waters, how like he lost his father during like World War II, and how that like led to like creating, well, having like basically like destroying like his mental health like to a certain extent, and pushing him like to create like some incredible music, right? And this is like a level that you wouldn't get with an AI, and there's no need like to get it or to replicate that, because I mean music is done also like for sharing experiences and for sharing emotions in a sense, and that is never going to go away. Sure. Another thing that I think like it was like super interesting that you said was, okay, so now I have like a Michelangelo, like a piece of art, a painting, right? And I want to recreate that. So I think like this is like something that happens like both in the machine environment as well as like in the human environment. So you usually have like one Michelangelo, like one, I don't know, Leonardo, right? But then you have like a lot of other people who tend like to copy that. They may be fantastic like painters, but perhaps like they are not necessarily like super creative, right? In the sense that they will more or less like copy like what other people have done and adjust it like a little bit.
Right.
And this is something, so that there's a great scholar. So she's a philosopher and psychologist called named Margaret Bowden. And so she came like with this idea of like different types of creativities. So one is called exploratory creativity, and it's the one that we were discussing like right now. So you have like a certain mental concept, right? So which is, for example, like the Michelangelo painting style, right? And then you have like a bunch of other people who are more or less like copying that, and they're exploring that concept, art concepts, or like mental concepts. But then every now and then you have like some people who go just like outside the known styles or like the known mental concepts. And here in these cases, you have like this, what Margaret Bowden calls transformational creativity. So creating something completely outside. Think of like Picasso, right?
Right.
So with Cubism, it's something like completely different from what came before, right? Of course, you could see like the seeds of Picasso's like painting style scattered like throughout like all the painters before him, but then he was the one who just like brought that huge innovation with Cubism. Same thing in music. Now, machines are decent, not great, but decent at exploratory creativity. They're not that great at transformational creativity. So, and this is like a huge challenge, and probably is going to be the next big challenge in academia and in research. So now that more or less we can create music that's decent enough, or poetry that's decent enough, how can we have like these machines being transformationally creative, right? And this is like something fascinating, because basically you are saying, you are asking to the machine to come up with ideas that are completely new, perhaps like outside of what like we've already like created like as humans. And that's like something like fascinating. And it's just like as if like we were like witnessing an alien species creating a new form of art that may be completely different from what we like.
Yeah. Alien is a good way to put that.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I want to discuss. I actually feel like this was probably a good place to end. I do, maybe at some point we'll have to do a round 2, because I would love to hear your thoughts on like on privacy and AI, and
of course,
Neuralink. We didn't even get into that, and like it'd be great to have you back and chat about those things some more. Because I feel like your take on it, especially with your history with AI and I don't know, just our discussion, it'd be awesome to hear more. But yeah, so Valerio, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It was really, really cool.
Yeah. And like with your channel, I would say stick with it as long as you can, because like the numbers, in my experience, I feel like I don't have that many numbers, or like my numbers aren't that high either. Like I think that's an ongoing thing, but it's more about connecting with the right people. We just talked about all this connection, and if you're connecting with the right people, that's what it's all about, Luckily, both of our channels brought us together, and so we were able to have this connection.
Of course.
And so, like I like I said, I appreciate you coming on here. You showed me a lot of things that I definitely need to research, and I'll put a lot of these links in the description of the YouTube video, at least. So yeah, thanks again, Valerio. I appreciate it. I know it's probably getting late there, so I'm going to let you go. But yeah, man.
Okay. Thank you very much.